In this section, we'll explore commands that will allow us to print text to the terminal, which we'll do using the echo command. We've used it once before. Then we'll print the contents of a file using the cat command. That also we have seen once before. Head and tail will allow us to print the first and last parts of a file. More and less will allow us to browse files one screen at a time. Will allow us to scroll up and down, go to the beginning and end of the file, and also allow us to do forward and backward search. And the sort command will allow us to sort the lines of a file. We can do it in ascending order or descending order, and we can also ignore case while we do that, right? So in this section we'll explore all these commands. Let us start with echo, right? So we saw echo once before when we created a file and we just used one single line, which was release underscore names, and we created the file release underscore names underscore 2.txt, right? So in that case we wrote the text to the file. Right now here we'll see how to print the text to the terminal, right? So let us get started with the echo command, and we'll also look at a few options that we can use. N will print it to the terminal without the trailing new line, and then we can also write text to a file, or we can also append text to a file. So we'll look at all of those options, right? So let us start with a very simple example. I'll go back to the terminal, right? So here we are writing one of the R release names, right? It is action of the toes, right? And I'm using the echo command. Now you can see that it has printed that to the terminal, right? You can also use quotes here, single or double quote, and it will still print it to the terminal, right? And action for action of the toes is the release name for R version 3.6.1. right? Now how about redirecting the output, right? So here the output was to the terminal, right? Now how about we redirect the output to a file, right? We did that once earlier with the release underscore names.txt. Now let us do it with another file, right? So we'll use echo. Now here there is another release name, great truth, and I will redirect the output to a file called release.txt, right? So let us do this. Now if we run ls, we should see that the release.txt has been created, right? You can see the file here, and if you use cat, you can see the output here, right? So we used echo to write the text greater to the file release.txt, and now you can see that the content is present here, right? How about appending text to an existing file, right? So we have already created this file release.txt, and we have written the text greater to the file, which is release.txt. Now let us write the name which we used earlier, which is action of the toes, right? And to append text to a file, we'll use this symbol, right? So action of the toes, and then we'll specify the file name, just release.txt, right? Let us run this and run cat release underscore text. Now you can see that action of the toes has been appended, right? In the first case, it redirected the output to the file, which was release.txt, right? And now in the second case we appended. Now let us go back and run the first case that we saw earlier, right? Which is echo greater to release.txt. Right now it will overwrite this file. Instead of appending, it will overwrite, right? Let us check this again. I can see there is only great truth, right? So you have to be careful when you are overwriting a file or when you are appending text to a file. Be careful, use the right options, and you will be able to use echo for printing text to the terminal or to the or redirecting that text to a file. Either you can overwrite the file or you can append the text to a file, right? So now let us move on. We'll move on from echo to cat, right? So cat will read data from files and it will print their contents, right? That is what we have been doing all along, right? And it is the simplest way to display the contents of a file at the command line, and it can be used to overwrite or append new content to a file as well, right? So cat can also be used to overwrite or append content to a file, and cat stands for catenate. Okay, so it stands for catenate. It is the simplest way to print the contents of a file at the command line, and it can also be used to overwrite or append new content to a file. Now let us try out a few examples using the cat command, right? So you can see that in the table we have specified how you can number all output lines using the n option, and then there are other options to concatenate and append files to a target file, right? So first we'll look at a simple example that we have been using from the previous cases as well, right? Let us print all the release names, our release names present in release underscore names dot text, right? So we are using cat, so it will read all the contents from the file which is release underscore names dot text, and it will print it to the terminal. Now if you want to number the output line, then you can use the n option, right? So here there is no numbers for the output line. We'll do that using the n option here. Right, now you can see that all the output has been numbered, right? So we have 30 release names in this file. The rest, as I said earlier, are in those two other files, right? We have the release names up till 2017 here. For those of 2018 and 19 are in other files, right? Now we have those two files, which is release underscore names underscore 18 and release underscore names underscore 19, right? So they contain the our release names for the year 2018 and 19. I want to create another file which will be release underscore names 18, 19, right? So we want to read the contents from both the files, which is release underscore names 18 and release underscore names 19, and we want to redirect the output to a new file, right? So let us do that. Right, so we have release underscore names underscore 18 for the release names of 2018. Similarly, we have release underscore names underscore 19 for the release names of 2019. Before I redirect the output to a new file, let us see how we can read and print the contents of more than one file, right? So here we have two file names. Let us see what happens, right? So it has printed the contents of both the files here, if you see, right? So first one ends at Excel Igloo, which is up to 2018, and from Great Truth up to Action of the Toast, you have the release names for 2019. Only thing is that it has not created a new line for the second file. That is, Great Truth should have been in the new line, but that has not happened, right? So now let us redirect this output to a new file, which will be release underscore names underscore 18 underscore 19 dot text. Okay, so I'm not printing it to the terminal, I am redirecting the output to a new file, and now we'll print it out. Right, so what you saw on the terminal in the previous command that we ran, Now you can see the same thing in the file, right? So cat can be used to read contents from different files and then write all those content to a target file, right? So that is also possible. Now what I would suggest is that you play around with this, right? Try to read content from different files and write it into a target file and see how that works, right? So we'll move on to the next command that we want to explore, which is head, right? So head will display the first 10 lines of a files by default, right? It basically prints the first parts of a file, but by default it will print the first 10 lines of a file. Now it can be used to display the first few lines or even first few bytes or characters of a file, right? So we look at some of the options that you can use. Using n, you can output the first n lines of a file, and using the C option you can output the first C bytes or characters of a file, right? And you can also ensure that you are outputting or printing everything but the last few lines of a file, right? And the last few characters of a line. So you can leave out the last 10 lines and print everything else, or you can leave out the last 10 bytes or 10 characters of a file and you can print it out. So let us try out head, right? So first I'll use head on release underscore names.txt, right? So this will print out the first 10 lines, right? So you can see there are the first 10 release names that we have, right? So by default it is printing only the first 10 lines of this file, which is release underscore names.txt. How about we want to specify the number of lines that it should read and print, right? So we can do that using the n option. So here I'll suggest it or indicate using the n option to print only the first 5 lines, right? So by default it will read and print the first 10 lines, but using the n option you can specify it to print the first 5 lines. And if you use the C option, it will only print the first 5 characters or bytes of this file, right? So you can see only first 5 characters. So unsuffered consequences, it has taken the first 5 bytes or characters and it has printed it. So when you want to print a specific number of lines, use n, and when you want to print a specific number of characters or bytes, you can use C. Now how about you want to print everything but the last 5 lines of a file, right? So we saw how to print the first 5 lines. Now let us see how we can print the last 5 lines, right? So here along with n, I'm going to use a dash along with 5 as well, right? So this says leave out the last 5 lines and print everything else, right? So it has now left the last 5 lines. To get more clarity, let us first print what is there in release underscore names.txt, right? And that way we'll know what has been printed and what has been left out. So last 5 lines, so it ends with kite eating tree, right? From another cano to kite eating tree. Now let us see if it has been left out. So it should only print till sincere pumpkin patch, right? So here you can see it prints only till sincere pumpkin patch. Rest of them from another cano to kite eating tree has been left out, right? How about we leave out last few characters and print everything? So let us say we'll leave out the last 4 characters, then kite eating tree will become kite eating, right? Let us try that as well. So to leave out the characters, we'll use the C option, and instead of 5 I'll specify 4, so that we have kite eating but not tree. There was some space there as well, so if I make it 6, I think tree should be gone. Even the TR that we see there should be gone. Yeah, so now you can see there is only kite eating instead of kite eating tree, right? So you can use this to print the first parts of your file. They also specify the number of lines it should print, or the number of characters or bytes it should print, and the number of lines or characters it should leave out while printing the contents, right? Now let us move on to the next command, which is tail, right? So tail is similar to head, but instead of printing the first parts of a file, it will print the last parts of a file, right? So let us take a look at the tail command, right? So it displays the last parts of a file, and using options, again the default is 10, right? So it will print the last 10 lines of a file, or the last characters or bytes of a file. So again, using the n option, you can show the last 10 or x number of lines of a file, or you can show all files since a specific number line, right? So let us say you want to show all the contents of the file from line number 10, right? Line number 1 to 9 you want to leave out. Similarly, you can, using the C option, you can show the last few bytes of the file, right? And can use small letter or capital letter F to keep reading the file until you press Ctrl C. Right? So it's a large file, it will just keep on reading the file until you press Ctrl C. Right? So we'll just quickly take a look at the tail command. Right, so here we'll see the last 10 names, right? Last 10 release names, right? So you can see kite eating tree, which was the last release name, our release name we had in this file. And if you want to specify the last 5 lines instead of 10, you can make it using n option. You can do that as well, right? So now it only shows the last 5 lines. In the previous case, by default it printed the last 10 lines. Now by using the n option, we are printing the last 5 lines. Now how about printing all the content from line number 10, right? So I'm saying instead of printing the last 10 lines, print everything from line number 10. Start from line number 10 and until the end of the file, print everything, right? So the initial 9 lines, they are not printed, line number 1 to 9. It starts from the 10th line and goes up to the end of the file where we have kite eating tree, and it will print out all those contents from the file, right? Similarly, if you want to see the last 10 bytes or characters of a file, you can use tail -c, or 5 bytes of a file, you can then use the file name. It is only showing the last 5 bytes or characters of this file. So it's basically the part of the tree in kite eating tree, right? So use head or tail whenever you are trying to read the first or the last parts of a file, right? Now we'll move on to the next command, which is more, right? So more will open a file for interactive reading, and it will show or display text one screen at a time, and using it you can do interactive reading, scrolling, and search, right? So we have a file here which I think is lorem ipsum.txt, right? So let us open it with more, right? Now it has I think displayed 10% of the file, right? So we have 10% of the file. So if you press on space, it will go on showing the text screen by screen, right? So now it has displayed 19% of the text in that file, right? You can see it at the bottom, more 19%, and you can use space for scrolling down, right? And you can use Q to quit, right? So once you have browsed through the text, you can use Q to quit, right? So now you can see the prompt is back. So use more when you want to look at the contents of a file screen by screen. Instead of the whole text being displayed, you can see the contents one screen at a time, and you can use space to scroll down and keep browsing that content, right? So we'll go to the next one, which is less, right? Less is similar to more, but it has more features, right? It will allow the user to scroll up and down. You can go to the beginning and the end of the file, and you can do forward and backward search, and ability to go to the next and previous match while searching the file, right? So you can use space to go down and small letter b to go up. The capital letter G will take you to the end of the file, while small letter g will take you to the start of the file. And then you have forward search and backward search. Use the question mark symbol for backward search, and small letter n to go to the next match while you are searching for a string or a match, and capital letter N to go to the previous match, and Q to exit. So let's try some of this. I will open the same text, right, using less, and again it has shown the contents of that file one screen at a time, right? So using space I can go down, right, and using the small letter b I can go up, right? And if I press on capital letter G, I go to the end of the file, right? It shows end there. And if I use small letter g, I go to the beginning of the file, right? So you can use this to navigate up and down the file, and then you can use Q to quit, right? You can also do backward and forward search. You can move between the matches, go to the next match or the previous match using small letter n and capital letter N, right? So I'll leave it for you to explore. If you have a big large document or a large file where you want to read it screen by screen or one screen at a time, you can use less. You can go to the beginning of the file, go to the end of the file, you can go up and down, and then also you can do forward and backward search, right? And you can always go to the next or previous match while you are searching the document or the file, right? So use more and less when you have these large files and you want to read them one screen at a time. Now let us go to the last command in this section, which is sort. And the sort command will sort the lines of a text file line by line, and using additional options we can sort a file in ascending or descending order. That is, using the R option you can sort the lines of the file in descending order, and you can use ignore case to ignore the case while sorting. If you want to use numeric order for sorting, use N, and if you only want to preserve unique lines while sorting the file, use the U option, right? So let us go ahead and try this. We will use the package underscore names text, right? There are two files. We'll use both of them while using the sort command. Now the thing to remember is that the contents can be sorted numerically or alphabetically, right? And the default rules for sorting are: lines starting with a number will appear before lines starting with a letter, right? So if there's a number at the starting of the line, that will come before a line which starts with a letter or alphabet. Lines starting with a letter that appears earlier in the alphabet will appear before lines starting with a letter that appears later in the alphabet, right? So if the line starts with A, or let's say D, it will appear before a line that starts with G, because G is later in the alphabet order, and lines starting with lowercase will appear before lines starting with same letter in uppercase. So if there is a small line starting with small letter A and capital letter A, the line with the small letter A will appear before the line with the capital letter A, right? So those are the rules remember them. We have written them in the learning management system as well, right? And now we will try to sort two files, right? So the first one is package underscore names, right? And we have the names of a few packages here, right? And some of them start with capital letter, some of them start with small letter, and they have all different alphabets also. They start from all different alphabets as well. And then there is another file which is package underscore names dot text, which also has these package names, but it starts with numbers, right? So we have added these numbers before the package name, right? So we'll use both of them, see how they are sorted with different options, right? So let's start with simple sort. We'll sort the lines of the package underscore names dot text, right? So here you can see, sorry, let me scroll down, right? So you have the output from the sort, right? So those lines starting with capital letter, they have appeared before those lines that start with small letter, right? Now let us sort this in descending order, right? And for that we'll do sort with the R option, right? So this will reverse the sort result. So in that way it will be in descending order, right? So now it starts from W, comes down to A. It starts with small letter. All the packages that start with small letter alphabets come first, followed by all the packages that start with capital letters, right? So this is descending order, sorting in descending order. Now let us ignore the case while we sort, right? So it doesn't matter whether it starts with capital letter or small letter, it will be sorted in the alphabetical order, right? So change this to ignore case. Ignore case. Right, now you can see that it starts from A, goes up to W, and the case of the first alphabet doesn't matter, right? So there's a combination of both small letter and capital letter. So whenever you want to ignore case, use that option to ignore the case while sorting the lines of this file. Now about numeric sort, right? We'll try to use the we'll try to sort numerically, and for that we'll use the N option, and we are also going to use a different file now, right? The file name which is package underscore names dot text, where we have added numbers before the package names, right? And we are using the N option to sort this numerically, right? So irrespective of the alphabet from which the package name starts, here you can see that it is sorted by the number, right? There's a number before the letter, so it is sorted from 1 to 100, right? Great. Now how about removing duplicates when you're sorting, right? So for example, here you can see there are two lines, right? 72 as repeated twice, you have overlapping here, and then you have the RSet package, right? So if you only want to retain unique lines when you are trying to sort the lines or contents of a file, use the U option, that stands for unique, right? So I'll go back to the previous file, which is package underscore names, right? And even there you can see that there are some duplicates, right? If you look carefully, then you'll be able to see some duplicates in this also, right? Let us just sort it once, and then we'll be able to see the duplicates even in this package, right? So here you can see YDR, it is repeated, tail R, right? So there are a lot of these package names that have been repeated. Here you can see Mongolite, right? Now we'll use the U option to retain only unique lines while we are sorting the lines of this file, right? So Let us sort it. Use the U option followed by the package names. Right now it will remove all those duplicates and retain only the unique lines from the file. Right, great. So that brings us to the end of the sort command. Now before I wrap up this section on input output, I want to introduce you to one more command, which is WC for word count. Right, it will print the number of lines, words and characters or bytes for the file. Right, if more than one file is specified, it will also print total line from both the files. Right, so let us use the WC command on release underscore names.txt. Right, so here you can see it has given the output. Right, it will tell you the number of lines, which is 30, number of words, which is 73, and number of characters or bytes, which is 546, followed by the name of the file. If you just want the number of lines, that is number of lines in the file, you can use the L option. Right, so it says there are 30 lines in the file. If you want only the word, there's a count of words in this file, then use the W option. Right, so there are 73 words in the file, it will display that. And if you only want to look at the number of characters or bytes, then use the C option. Right, so here it shows there are 546 characters or bytes in this file. So whenever you want to count the number of lines or words or characters or bytes in a file, you can use the WC command. Right, great. Now that brings us to the end of the input output section. Now in the next section, we'll learn about search and regular expression. Right, so we'll learn to search for a given string in a file or multiple files. We'll also learn how to find files using file names or file extensions.